We're going to continue on with our series called Decoding Communication. We've been dealing with one of the greatest mysteries in the world, and that is that mystery of decoding communication between a man and a woman, between a husband and a wife, especially in the marriage relationship. We've been discussing about how God has given us a key to unlock our communication problems. In fact, sessions 3 through 5, we were focusing on how a wife can better understand her husband, and how a wife can energize and motivate her husband by learning to speak his language, and also by understanding what's going on in his head and why he maybe says some of the things he says and why he reacts the way he does in different situations. Well, as I said, this is going to be fair and balanced reporting, so now we're going to do the other side of the story. So some of you guys are going to say, boy, this is one-sided. Well, that's what the ladies thought about the last several sessions. In fact, the last session was called Understanding the Mind of a Woman, and if you missed that, you definitely want to get this whole series, or you want to get that one program and watch it, because it'll be very helpful for you, because we laid the groundwork of what is going to be shared in this presentation and in the next presentation. Well, now we want to talk to you men about motivating your wives by learning to speak their language, and that language is the language of love. Now I can hear some of you already, some of you guys is like, you know, I'm a guy so I can relate. Oh brother, here we go again with some more of this love stuff. Well, let's review something about all this love stuff, okay? For the last 20 years, our culture is focused on love as the remedy to all relationship problems. And there's several reasons for this. And because of this is why a lot of men who do not want to go to counseling, and they don't want to read books dealing with relationships, because the greatest clientele of people who buy books dealing with relationships, or the greatest number of people who want to go and get counseling, are usually women. And I want to share with you that in the marketing strategy of publishing books, people know, the publishers know, that it's predominantly women who buy these kind of books on relationships. And so those books have been always written from a female perspective. And in that whole concept of the feminist mentality of relationships, usually it always points the finger at the guy, saying that he's the problem and that he's the one that needs to learn to love his wife better, and if he learns to love his wife better, that, you know, everything is going to go better. And so a lot of men have gun-shied away from all these things like counseling and books, because they feel like they're just going to get beat up. And that's why we had the last previous sessions that were dealing with wives towards men, is to try to bring a balance to this, to show that a wife has a responsibility in respecting her husband. You know, on the other hand, in society, while on one hand we have this kind of like radical feminism and women's superiority kind of thing that's going on the other hand, we have men that oftentimes abuse their authority. They're choleric, they're controllers, and even Christian men who use certain Bible verses to control and manipulate their wives. And I want to share with you, both sides are out of balance. And in this series, I'm hoping that somehow we're going to be able to bring balance to this. Now, I shared in a previous session that, you know, men speak a language of their own. You know, men speak a Slavic, they speak German. And the women oftentimes speak a romantic languages. You know, the women speak the French, they speak the Italiano, you know, they speak the romantic languages. And the fact that men and women process and speak kind of a little bit differently doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. It just basically means it's different. And God wants to help us to bring that balance, that decodes for us these weak links in our marriage relationships, in our male and female communication. You know, the text in Ephesians 5 uses one of the most powerful cross parallels in revealing the powerful truth about Christ and the church, and side by side, parallel to that, the relationship between the husband and the wife. And I just want to read to you these verses again. We've been referring back to these verses over and over through this series. But it says, "Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies." Now, stop and think about this for a second. Now, is this saying that you guys are so egotistical that we know that you love yourself, that you need to at least love your wife as much as you love yourself? No, that's not what this verse is saying. What it's saying is that as you look at Scripture, that a husband should marry his wife and the two should become what? One flesh. And as the two become one flesh, that a husband should love himself and his wife because they are one. And so a man will love his own wife as his own body because the two of them are one. It's a beautiful truth. It goes on to say that he that loveth his wife loveth himself, you see, because the two have become one. For no man has ever hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. This is so powerful. And it goes on to say, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself. And what? The wife see that she reverence or respect her husbands. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 through 33. I really like what it says in the Phillips translation. He really takes the one section there and he breaks it down really practically. He says, in practice, what I have said amounts to this. Let every one of you who is a husband love his wife as he loves himself, and let the wife respect her husband. Now, women are commanded to respect, and I brought this out in the last several sessions on the sessions dealing with understanding the mind of a man and speaking the language of respect, that a wife or a woman is commanded to respect their husbands. Why? Because that is something that just does not come naturally to a woman. So the Lord understands us. He made us. He engineered us, and He understands our strong points and our weak points. And He's saying to the women, I command you in love to respect your husbands. And you guys, on the same side of the token, men are commanded to love their wives because why? It doesn't come natural to us as men. And so God says you need to love your wives. And Ephesians chapter 5 is this really unique and beautiful motif between Christ and the church. A wife should look up to and respect her husband even as the church should to Christ. And the husband should love and die for his wife as did Christ. Because why? The church was the apple of his eye. It was his supreme regard. And that's the way it should be in a husband and wife relationship, that the husband should have the wife be his supreme regard. And Christ did not lord over his church. What was he? He was a servant. He called them his friends. He said, ye all are brethren, or showing equality in a family sense. And that shows that as a husband, that we are not to lord over our wives or our families, but we are to be called servants, that they should be our friends, that they should be our brethren in a sense of equality in a family sense. And so men who take some of these scriptures and they twist it for their own manipulative purposes are taking it completely out of context because it's showing love and balance and equality. Husbands are not to be lords or kings. They are to be the spiritual guardians of the family. And it goes on to say that the two shall become one flesh to reflect the character of God in a more and full and complete way that they cannot individually. Now, some of you are saying, well, look, I'm single, my husband left me, or I'm not married. How does that apply to me? Well, basically, a person, an individual can reflect God's glory. When the Holy Spirit's dwelling in them and they have surrendered their life to Christ, God can start to reveal Himself through them. But in a unique and special way, God has made the union, this mystical union between a man and a wife in a marriage relationship. And that is why it says right in the book of Genesis that it's not good that man should be alone, and that God made a helpmeet for man, and that the two shall become one. See, Christ nurtures and looks over His church. And so should a husband, a wife, and his family. I love this Bible verse. In Colossians 3:19 it says, husbands, agape love your wives, and be not bitter against them. How many guys are bitter against their wives? They hold on to petty hurt feelings. They start cold wars in the home, and they won't talk to their wives. They get upset about things, and they like we talked about, they compartmentalize things in their thinking, and they start to shut their wife out. And it says, husbands, love your wife, agape love your wives, and be not bitter against them. And it's interesting, through the whole scriptures, there's no place where a wife, as I pointed out in some of the previous sessions, where a wife is commanded to agape love her husband. But a husband is commanded by God to agape love his wife, because God knows that doesn't come natural to us men. It goes on to say, Ephesians 5, verse 25, it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and did what? Gave Himself for it. Again, in 1 Peter 3:7, it says, likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them, in other words, with your wife, according to knowledge or understanding, giving honor unto them. This is saying, husbands, dwell with them, your wife, according to knowledge, in other words, with understanding, giving honor or esteem, holding them up in the highest degree is really what the original translation is saying here. Hold your wife up to the highest degree. Honor her. Christ esteems the church. It's the apple of his eye. It's the item of his supreme regard. And that's the way a husband should be to his wife. Now, God commanded men to love their wives. And, us guys, we kind of tend to think of things kind of like from a sports perspective or something. To us, it's maybe the 50-50 plan. If my wife comes up to the 45% mark, I'll come up to the 45% mark. But till I see some changes here, I'm only going to come to the 25%, and then she's going to have to come up to 35% before I move to the 40%. And I want to just tell you guys, that is not God's plan. It's not God's plan that it should be the 50-50 plan, a business deal of some sort, but it should be the 150 plan. We should give 150% to our relationship with our wives. Both of us should be on the same team, and we should run all the way to the infield, all the way down to the goalie, and give 150%. This business relationship that so oftentimes comes up in a relationship between a husband and wife is just wrong. It's not found in the scriptures. And I just want to share, men, you need to step up the plate and be men. I'm just going to talk from my own heart, my own experience. I know how us guys can be. Men are really just little boys and older bodies, okay? They often say that the only difference between men and boys are the size of the toys. Well, it's also true that men are just little boys and big and older bodies, and we pout like little boys. We hold on to grudges. We can be so stubborn at times, and that stubbornness can stop us from being able to mend our relationships with our spouse. We need to come to a point in our lives that we recognize that there's crazy cycles going on in our relationship, and step up to the plate and be willing to put a stop to it. Now I want to share with you what I refer to as the leave and cleave passage in the scriptures. It's found in Genesis 2:24. It says, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Husbands commanded to leave and to cleave. And this is such an interesting word, because this word cleave literally means to cling or to adhere like glue. Now, why is this given? Why is this command given? Because I'll tell you why. Because it's God's design that a man should leave his mother and his father and should stick together like glue with his wife. Why? Because the Lord knows that the wife wants and desperately needs closeness in their relationship. In the Old Testament, when Leah was talking about her desire to have Jacob love her more, she says, now this time will my husband be joined unto me. Genesis 29:34. Here's the word join. She's saying, I want my husband to be attached to me. I want him to be cleaving to me, to be glued to me. Leah said, after bearing 6 sons for Jacob, finally she said, now will my husband dwell with me. Genesis chapter 30, verse 20. See, it's a woman's desire that the husband be close, because a wife needs emotional closeness in her relationship with her husband. In Song of Solomon 8:3, it says, his left hand should be under my head, and his right hand should embrace me. So in Song of Solomon chapter 3, verse 4, it says, I found him whom my soul loveth. I held him and would not let him go. You see, the wife's desire is for closeness, both for physical as well as for emotional and spiritual closeness. The essence of masculinity is initiation, and the essence of femininity is response. Now, oftentimes a man will like it when a wife initiates. That makes him feel good. It feels wanted. He has emotional insecurities too. But generally speaking, in the male-female world, masculinity is the essence of initiation, and femininity is the response to that initiation. Most women want and need closeness. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Sometimes maybe a lady, when she was younger, she was sexually or physically abused and she's got some emotional issues where she doesn't want to have her husband close. It could be that too, that there's some bad things that have gone on in their relationship, and so she pushes her husband away because there's been offenses and barriers built up, and so she just finally just can't deal with the emotional hurt, so she closes off her husband. And so there's these issues that go on, and sometimes people need to go to a good pastor or somebody and counsel with them. But there's something interesting about this whole thing about boys and girls and men and women, and this whole thing about needing closeness. And they did this study. It was just, to me, it was really intriguing. They took 2 boys and 2 girls of different age groups that were best of friends. They took 2 6-year-old boys and they put them in a room where there was just 2 chairs and a video camera was videotaping them, and there was nothing else in the room. And the 2 boys went in there and they never sat in the chairs. They were just kind of like looking around, talking, making noises, and kind of over their shoulder throwing glances at each other and talking to each other and kind of looking at each other a little bit and then talking. And that was the way they were interacting. Well, then on the other hand, there were the 2 6-year-old girls who were best of friends who were put into this room. They walked immediately up to the chairs. One girl turned the chair sideways. The 2 girls sat really close together and they looked at each other and they started talking and talking and talking and talking. Does that tell you something about the way that men and women interact? Well, they did the same thing with 2 12-year-old boys. The 2 12-year-old boys went in and they sat down in the chair like this. And they were sitting there. Why do you think they put us in here? Well, I'm not really sure. What do you think this is about anyhow? Well, I don't know. And they're talking kind of shoulder to shoulder. Remember how I talked about in one session about how men like the shoulder and shoulder relationships? And the 2 12-year-old girls they put in there, same thing. They turned their chairs, they looked at each other, they started talking and going on and on. The same thing happened with the 16-year-old boys. They put them in the room and they started talking, and they were talking kind of over their shoulder with just indirect eye contact, sometimes short eye contact. But the girls came face to face because, you see, girls or women want closeness in their relationship. Now, I've traveled around quite a bit, and there's this times that I've been what I call stuck in airports. And they have these interesting little coffee shops in the airports. And they have interesting looking little tables about this high, and you see people standing around these tables drinking coffee. Very seldom, if never, I've ever seen a group of big burly men standing around one of these little tables, and they're talking like this. Hey, Jim, you want this little napkin? How about a cup of tea? How about some of these little cookies? Do you want some of these? Well, Dave, tell me about how you're doing. How are the kids? You know, you just don't see guys interacting that way with each other. What you do see when you go into these coffee shops, you know, walk by and look in there, you see women sitting or standing talking face to face. Oh yeah, sometimes I've seen young couples too that are kind of in a courtship mode, and they're like face-to-face talking intimately, you know, when that glow is there and such. But a woman desires that closeness, that face-to-face closeness. God wired women differently. It's not wrong, it's just different. So, you know, as I shared too, men will compartmentalize. It's a big weakness for us because sometimes what it does is it causes us to stuff issues. You know, when our wife is trying to vent and she's trying to share things with us, you know what us guys do, we'll just shut down, we'll stuff issues. Now that same compartmentalizing is a great thing when it comes to risking our lives for somebody or having to focus ourselves on getting a job accomplished and shutting out everything else. It's a great strength, but it makes a weakness for us when it happens in a way that will cause us to shut down and not deal with issues. Now, there was one time, for instance, a story of a wife who came to her husband and she started complaining, saying, you know, we just haven't had any time together. We never have any one-on-one time. I want to spend some one-on-one time with you. And he looks at her and he says, look, we just spent last Sabbath with Bill's family. And then we took the kids to the beach last Sunday. And then last week we went and visited your folks. Why can't you be happy with all of that and quit asking me for more of my time? And you see what? The guy completely missed the point, right over his head. And then he didn't realize what his wife was asking for was some of that face-to-face time. You know, the guys love the shoulder-to-shoulder time, as I brought out in some of the other sessions, but a wife really craves that face-to-face time. My wife and I have been trying to make it a habit of going out sometimes and doing something just together. We kind of refer to it as a date night, where we just go and we sit at a table together, go out to eat, and we just have face-to-face time. And if she doesn't have that one-on-one time, she sometimes will start to wonder, does he really love me? And that's really a question that will haunt her in her mind. When she does not feel close, she'll react, and often in a way that will make men think that she's being negative or disrespectful. And she'll try to move towards her husband, getting face to face, getting closer to try to resolve the problem. And I'm going to talk in the next session about venting and about how a wife needs to vent her feelings. But men do not understand what's happening, and they start feeling threatened. They start feeling disrespected because the wife is coming closer and closer, face to face. And we often say that men, oftentimes will fight with their hands, but a woman will fight with her tongues. And then she'll come to her husband and say, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? And then he'll just shut down and he'll stomp off. And she feels unloved. He feels disrespected. And again, this whole crazy cycle kicks in where he reacts without love, and then she reacts, and then she reacts without respect, and then he reacts without love, and this crazy cycle spins and spins and spins and goes out of control, and you have two good-willed people that love each other, and this miscommunication takes place, and they wonder what in the world's going on, and two good-willed people end up in conflict with each other. Now, I'm going to share with you something that's just totally amazing. Did you know that 7 out of 10 women often think or worry about their relationship with their husband? When asking several thousand women this one question, it's amazing to see how they answered the question. The question was, under what circumstances do you think about your relationship, whether it's going well or how your husband feels about you? Just choose one. And here's the stats. 50% of the women said most of the time they have thoughts about their relationship with their husband and wondering whether their relationship's going well or not. 19% of the women said often or occasionally. Add that up. That's almost 70% right there. Another 11% said, yeah, that kicks in when we have conflict or difficulties. And then 20% said never. Wow. So a wife needs to be reminded that you love her and that everything is good in your relationship. And you can do this, you guys, by simply spending face-to-face time with your wife. Tell her so and express love to her. There's a lot of good ways to do that. Letting her know that you like the way she looks. Tell her that you think that she looks beautiful, that she's pretty, that she's done herself up nice for the day. Now, I shared with you guys something. I shared with the wife something in one of the past sessions about giving a respect note to your husband. Well, I want to suggest to you men to do the same thing. Give a love note to your wife. Okay, I know some of you guys are going to bristle up and you go, oh man, I don't like these kind of suggestions, having to do this kind of stuff. But what is meaningful to a woman? Just stop and think about it. You could go out and get a little rock and write on it, honey, our relationship is just as solid as this rock, I love you. And you could varnish it and give it to her. And you know what? 27 years later, when she's in a nursing home, you've passed away, the grandkids will come in, and that little rock will still be sitting beside her bed because that meant something to her, because that's her perception, her value system. So take a card, not on your anniversary or on her birthday, just go get a card for your wife and not have it be a joke card or anything like that, and write in that card that you love your wife, and put 3 things in there about what you love about her. And just watch how she'll react to this. And I shared earlier on too that men and women have different point systems. A guy thinks that by providing for his wife or his family that he is giving financial security. And really what the woman wants is emotional security. And that's kind of what we're talking about as we go through this session here. We're talking about dealing with your wife's emotional security. Men have this point system. They think, well, if I buy my wife a new car or a new house or something, I'm going to score 50,000 points. Well, the truth is that if you go to your wife when she's been having a bad day and you simply put your arms around her and you say to her something like, honey, you make me happy. You're the only woman for me. You have just gained 5 million points. And it costs a whole lot less than buying a new car or a house, guys. This is good news. Now, a group of women were asked this question. If you had to choose between these 2 bad choices, which would you rather endure? And this was a question among married women. 70% of the women said they would rather face financial struggles than the struggles that come from insecurity or lack of closeness in their relationship. What a wife and a family want more than anything is for a dad. A dad's gone all the time, he's working all the time, he's not there. The family needs a dad. You need to set your priorities, you guys, and look at your family. How much time are you spending with your family? And a wife, you know what she needs? She wants a husband that's there to assure her that everything's okay and have that closeness. By ensuring your wife that there's that closeness there, by just simply telling her everything's all right, that will do an incredible amount of good in helping to make her feel close to you. Now, here's some simple suggestions in closing. 1, She will feel close to you. She will feel loved by you when you want to be with her face to face. As I shared already, spend that face-to-face time. Set aside time to allow her to talk to you, to be able to vent her frustrations and listen to her. Learn to listen. Give her that face-to-face time that she wants, desperately needs to have closure in her relationship of these pop-up windows, as I shared in the last session, that come to her mind. Secondly, she will feel close to you and feel loved by you when you aren't secretly mad at her. Now, she can read your motives. You come home, you got a bad look on your face. She'll ask you, what's the matter? And you'll say, nothing. And she starts to think, oh no, I did something. You need to be open with her. Let her know that you're not secretly holding a grudge, that you're not pouting about something, that you need to let her know that everything is okay. And 3, try to learn to empathize with you. These are some of the things that I'm trying to learn, and I'm still learning in my relationship with my wife. And I see as I start to do it more and more that it really, really helps. When you empathize with her. And then 4, when you resolve and reconcile with her. Maybe there's been a disagreement, there's been a spat, maybe some tension was there. Try to resolve and make reconciliation with her. And you will help her to know that you are close, that you're emotionally there for her, that she will feel loved by you. 5, when you are completely committed to her, when she knows without reservation that you're not wandering off, watching and looking at other women, or that you're involved with internet pornography or these different things that men, get pulled off into, but let her know that you're completely committed to her. And 6, when you treasure her above everything else. When these values are not there, guys, she's going to feel unloved. Right or wrong, whether her feelings are justified or not, that's what she's going to feel. And God has wired her that way. Sorry, that's just the way a lot of women are. She needs closeness. In the next session, we're going to be covering some amazing things that are going to really help you. They're going to open your eyes. In fact, some of these things are going to be absolutely good news as I start sharing with you about how your wife has all those pop-up windows that I shared in the last session, and about how she needs help in closing those windows, how she needs to be able to vent problems to you, and about how you don't have to try to fix everything. Wow, that's wonderful news. The next session is going to be called Speaking the Language of Love, Part 2. And I'm looking forward to sharing this information with you. It's just some amazing information that has come to us through the scriptures and through some other sources. And until then, God bless you, and I hope these presentations, these sessions have been a wonderful blessing to you.